It looked like a regular jewellery shop in Hatton Garden. Gold bars, clean counters, designer watches under glass. But in the back, stacks of cash, still warm from the street. The customers weren't city traders or tourists. They were traffickers, middlemen, couriers with dirt under their nails and encrypted phones in their pockets. Every purchase was clean on paper. But behind the receipts was a flow of drug money, laundered, rinsed, and reinvested. At the heart of it stood two names no one in the jewellery district had ever heard. Matthew Byrne, calm, calculated, hiding in the quiet of Sevenoaks. Bo Devlin, younger, sharper, forged in the grind of East London blocks. Together, they built a cocaine empire worth nearly £190 million, smuggling tons of Class A drugs into the UK and laundering the profits through gold, guns, and ghost companies. They thought no one was watching. They thought their encrypted chats made them invisible, until the messages spilled out. And the doors came off the hinges. This is the story of Matthew Byrne and Bo Devlin, the men who turned bananas, bullets, and bullion into one of the UK's most sophisticated cocaine empires. Matthew Byrne didn't fit the image. He wasn't flashy. He didn't throw cash in clubs or drive supercars. He lived in Sevenoaks, a quiet Kent town better known for golf courses than drug empires. In his 40s, Byrne kept to himself. He owned a new Jaguar, was building a home next door to his parents, and looked, to the outside world, like a man with a steady plan. But online, he had other names. Slick Valley, Official Cleaner, both used on EncroChat, the encrypted network traffickers swore by. That's where he ran the show, coordinating shipments, laundering profits, and managing contacts across continents. Byrne wasn't the one lifting crates or driving lorries. He was the system builder, cold, clinical, and dangerously efficient. Bo Devlin was the younger of the two, just 33 when arrested. From East London, his alias was Scalp Cleaner, and unlike Byrne, Devlin had grown up around the noise. He was street-formed, hands-on, and ready to move whatever was needed. He ferried gold to the Hatton Garden jeweller. He burned fake banana shipments when they were no longer useful. And when there were stacks of cash to shift, Devlin handled it, sometimes £100,000 at a time. The two men had different origins but shared the same skill: silence. They operated without spectacle. No turf wars, no bloodshed. By the time they were caught, they weren't just dealers. They were importers, launderers, and suppliers, plugged in directly to South American producers. Their chats weren't about ounces or kilos, they talked in tons. Two names that barely made a whisper in the streets. But behind the scenes, they'd flooded them. Their contacts weren't middlemen. They were South American cocaine wholesalers, men moving tons, not kilos. Over EncroChat, Byrne discussed deals that dwarfed most UK networks, 5 tons, sometimes more. The ambition wasn't just staggering, it was real. Between March and June 2020, they were actively working to import around 5 tons of cocaine through European ports, including Antwerp, and others not named publicly. The drug would arrive in Europe from Colombia or Ecuador, often under the cover of legitimate produce. It was logistics masked as commerce. They used established routes, mapped and tested. Later images on Byrne's phone showed lorries halted at the Colombia-Ecuador border, cargo being scrutinized. These weren't idle messages. They were snapshots from the field. Once in Europe, the shipments would continue into the UK, often broken up, rerouted, and hidden in consignments meant to blend in. From seaports to motorways, the product moved quietly, tracked only by encrypted phones and coded language. Byrne's network had every link covered: source, transit, arrival, storage. He knew the bottlenecks, the weak points, the timings. This was a man who didn't just buy coke, he orchestrated its journey. Devlin followed orders, but even his messages showed familiarity with the system, referencing delivery timings, weight calculations, and cost breakdowns. One shipment alone cost them £3 million for 600 kilos. a price that said everything. This wasn't stepped-on gear or second-rate supply. It was raw, clean, and high-purity cocaine straight from source. On the streets, once cut and broken down, it would have pulled in several times the price. They weren't building a business, they were running a pipeline, and for nearly 8 years it flowed without interruption. Their shipments didn't look suspicious. No secret crates, no false bottoms, just bananas. The fruit came in by the pallet, tons at a time. From the outside, it was fresh produce. On the manifest, nothing unusual. But buried inside some of those loads was cocaine packed in blocks, wrapped, sealed, and buried beneath layers of yellow skin. To make it work, they built fronts. Fake companies, full with names, addresses, and VAT numbers. Paper businesses designed to move product, dodge customs, and keep the real network invisible. But the method wasn't just about hiding, it was about testing. Bayern ran dummy runs, full banana consignments sent with no drugs inside, just to see if the route held. If a clean load made it through, the real one followed. Those tests weren't cheap. One run cost £300,000, all of it burned, literally. When the bananas couldn't be shifted through legal channels, Bayern ordered Devlin to torch the pallets. No loose ends, no trace. It wasn't all by lorry. Byrne also spoke of plug cars, everyday vehicles fitted with custom compartments carved into bodywork. The builder behind them was known only as the Plug Boss, a shadow figure who specialized in turning hatchbacks into smuggling tools. Drivers, often paid £50,000 per trip, ran 250 kilos at a time. The compartments were sealed, silent, and near impossible to detect without taking the car apart. Every detail was engineered. Every run was a test of timing, nerve, and trust. And for years, it worked. No alarms, no seizures, just drugs in, cash out, and the fruit crates kept coming. The gold looked legitimate, stamped, weighed, sold through a shop in Hatton Garden, London's jewellery hub. On paper, clean. In reality, it was part of one of the UK's most effective laundering operations. The man behind the counter was Chris O'Shea, 56, a jeweller based on Avery Hill Road in New Eltham. On EncroChat, he went by All-Star Gin, and to Bayern and Devlin, he was more than a shopkeeper. He was the financial engine behind their empire. O'Shea exchanged bulk street cash for gold bars and designer watches. His store became the wash cycle, scrubbing criminal proceeds into assets that could be stashed, resold, or paraded without question. Bayern didn't deal in small amounts. He was moving hundreds of thousands at a time. He bought 10 to 15 gold bars in one go, each costing around £40,000. Photos from his phone later showed the stash, gleaming stacks of bullion, a digital trophy cabinet of laundered wealth. O'Shea charged a 3% commission, but the return was clean currency, untraceable and ready to recirculate. When investigators traced it back, they weren't looking at tax dodges or cash under the table deals. They were staring at a multi-million-pound operation with every gram of gold tied to a block of cocaine, and for years, no one noticed. The shop stayed open, the gold kept moving, and the money stayed silent. Cocaine wasn't the only thing Matthew Bayern moved. Tucked beneath the drugs and gold was something else, something colder. Firearms. He didn't advertise them. He offered them to select contacts using the same encrypted channels that handled drug deals. Messages showed him discussing self-loading pistol, compact weapons built for rapid fire. Bayern also offered silencers, packaging lethality with silence, tools designed for criminal wars, not self-defense. One of his key buyers was Jody Hall, a 51-year-old from Bromley. On EncroChat, he went by Unbeaten Moose. Bayern used a third party to verify every deal, a figure referred to only as the boxer, who physically inspected each weapon before anything changed hands. The process was meticulous and professional. In July 2020, Hall was arrested while collecting one of Bayern's weapons. It had passed through the boxer's hands. Bayern knew exactly what had happened: the arrest, the risk, the exposure. But what came next was more alarming. Bayern messaged contacts about springing Hall from a prison van, not in theory, in detail. He claimed to know what kind of officers were guarding him, whether they'd be plainclothes or uniformed. He even said he had people who had done it before. Later, Hall pleaded guilty to firearms and drug offences. He was sentenced in 2020 to 12 years in prison. The plan to rescue him never made it past encrypted texts, but it showed just how far Bayern was willing to go. Bayern was still coordinating cocaine shipments at the time, still moving cash through Hatton Garden, still laundering. But in the background, he was willing to break someone out under armed guard just to keep his network intact. For investigators, it exposed something deeper. Not just a criminal businessman, but a man prepared for extreme violence if it meant protecting the machine. And the machine was still running. But the pressure was building, and time was running out. By October 2020, the network had cracked, but it hadn't yet broken. That came later, slowly, one piece at a time. As we discussed earlier in the arrest and sentencing of Jody Hall, July 2020, then came Chris O'Shea, the Hatton Garden jeweler who turned stacks into white money. NCA and OCP teams raided the premises in coordination with wider arrests. His shop was searched, his records pulled, and the paper trail began to unravel. The arrest itself came quietly. At his home on Avery Hill Road in New Eltham, O'Shea was taken in. There were no chases, no resistance. Just a man who thought his work would never be traced back to the streets it came from. Inside the shop and his home, they found the signs, transactions and large deals. It had looked legitimate for years. Now it looked like what it was, a laundering hub at the heart of a £190 million empire. Chris O'Shea was later tried at Maidstone Crown Court. In January 2024, he pleaded guilty to money laundering and drugs offences and was sentenced to 11 years in prison. One by one, the pillars of the network were falling. O'Shea's was wrapped in gold, but it collapsed just the same. But it wasn't a chance. It wasn't luck. The trigger behind all of it was Operation Venetic. The moment authorities cracked EncroChat, the encrypted platform used by the criminal underworld across Europe. Suddenly, every message was visible, every alias connected to a real name. And from that moment on, Bernard Devlin's empire wasn't secure. It was numbered. Then it came to the real architects. The organised combined force of NCA and Met detectives moved in quietly but with precision. They knew exactly where to go. They had read every message. Matthew Bayern was arrested at home in Sevenoaks. The house was clean on the outside. Inside, it was different. Officers found £20,000 in cash stuffed in a drawer, slips showing fat deposits in hidden accounts, a brand new Jaguar car and a blinking EncroChat handset that still held traces of the empire. Then they hit his girlfriend's address. It wasn't subtle. Officers had to break through a reinforced door, the kind rarely seen in quiet Kent roads. Inside, designer clothes, Gucci bags, and leaflets for Portuguese villas. A quiet plan to vanish when the time was right. At his parents' house, officers uncovered a taser, illegal under UK law, and documents in Devlin's name, tying the two together even tighter. On the other hand, Bo Devlin's flat on Weald Road wasn't hidden behind gates or alarms, but inside, it told its own story. Roughly £5,000 in cash sat ready to move, not enough to flag alone, but too much to ignore. A surveillance bug detector lay nearby, a tool built for paranoia, for checking if someone was listening, and next to it, CS spray. Illegal, aggressive, and never kept without reason. His wardrobe wasn't subtle either. Rows of designer trainers, luxury watches, high-end labels, the kind that don't stack up on a regular payslip. None of it was hidden. They didn't expect to be caught. Not really. Not with EncroChat in their pockets. Not after 8 years of silence. But the door had come off the hinges. And everything, the gold, the guns, the ghost companies, was now evidence. By early 2025, the evidence against Matthew Byrne and Bo Devlin was locked in. Years of surveillance, decoded encrypted messages, photographs, asset records, and seized cash, all pointing to a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had smuggled tons of cocaine and laundered millions. Their trial took place at Maidstone Crown Court, beginning with guilty pleas entered on 9th January 2025. Neither man contested the core charges. Byrne, then 44, pleaded guilty to charges relating to cocaine importation and money laundering. Firearms charges connected to his supply of illegal weapons were left on file, meaning they could be revived in future, but were not pursued at this stage. Bo Devlin, aged 33, also pleaded guilty to drug trafficking and money laundering offences. There was no publicly reported mitigation offered by the defence, a likely indication that both men had little room to manoeuvre in the face of the overwhelming evidence collected during Operation Venetic. The prosecution, led by the Organised Crime Partnership, OCP, a joint task force of the NCA and Metropolitan Police, presented the men as key figures in a transnational network. They described how Byrne and Devlin coordinated bulk cocaine shipments from South America via European ports, proofs of discussing £3 million loads and dummy runs, and rest of the other proofs of converting illicit cash into gold bars and designer watches. On 7th March 2025, sentencing was handed down. Matthew Byrne was sentenced to 21 years and 6 months in prison. Bo Devlin received a sentence of 17 years. In total, the two were jailed for 38.5 years. Two men, once hidden behind encrypted screens and false company fronts, were now facing years behind real bars. What do you make of it? The weight of the operation, the scale of the laundering, the sentencing? Or should Byrne and Devlin have faced even longer behind bars? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments. If you want more real UK crime stories told like this, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay locked in. There's always another case to uncover. Ooh.